Now another use for dialogue, advancing the plot. So since we were going with looking for Alaska, let's stick with it for a minute. And here's a scene where a major event in the life of the narrator begins, and it's all in dialogue. We were just talking about Truth or Dare, played out in 7th grade or still cool. Never played it, I said. No friends in 7th grade. Well, that does it, she shouted, a bit too loud given the late hour, and also given the fact that she was openly drinking wine in the room. Truth or Dare? All right, I agreed, but I'm not making out with the Colonel. The Colonel sat slumped in the corner. Can't make out, too drunk. Alaska started. Truth or Dare, Pudge? Dare. Hook up with me. So I did. So there's an example where a major plot point happens, and the entire invitation and denouement of it is completely done in dialogue. Here it is, not done in dialogue, if you'd just like to see how boring it would be in exposition. We were playing Truth or Dare when Alaska asked me to hook up with her. That's not very exciting. Okay, dialogue can also be used to set the scene. You don't think of dialogue as being used to describe scenes. You think of scenes as being something like tall cypress Italian trees lined the drive that led to the mansion's front entrance. But what if it was in dialogue? Oh my, she said, I've never seen such tall cypress trees. It's like they're leading us to the front door. That's a lot more interesting, isn't it? And think about that the next time you need to describe a scene, and see if there's a way you can put it into the mouth of one of your protagonists. Dialogue can be used to develop character, and we saw that earlier in that passage from Walk Two Moons, where Sal was saying, I don't want it, I don't care if she likes me or not, I don't want to hear it. She's very contrary there. And so that's really developing her character throughout that whole scene. It can also be used to replace exposition. Here's a bit of exposition that is kind of amusing but dull. Dating him would be like a series of unnecessary root canals interspersed with occasional make-out sessions. Clever turn of phrase, but it's a boring sentence. But if you put it into dialogue, as John Green and David Levithan did in Will Grayson, Will Grayson, it comes out, dating you would be like a series of unnecessary root canals interspersed with occasional make-out sessions. By having a character say that, just that change of the word to you, it's no longer an observation by the author. It is now a character actually saying that, and if somebody said that out loud, it would actually be pretty funny. Dialogue can be used to break up your narrative. So grab a book. Here's a good test drive. Just grab a book, some fiction book you have lying around. Riffle through it and read one line of it. Just read one line, whatever. Okay? And now I'm going to guess that what you read was probably dialogue. And the reason that I guess that is that when you flip through a book, it's very boring if the book has solid gray pages of exposition, of narrative, one after the other. What we look for is dialogue to break it up. It's much more interesting. And so when you flip through a book in the bookstore to decide whether to buy it, you're likely to judge whether or not those pages are gray or whether they're broken up with lots of interesting dialogue. So there's a lesson for you. If you want to sell a book that's in a bookshop, you'd better make sure that those pages are broken up with lots of interesting dialogue. So let's talk about dialogue techniques a little bit. There's all that punctuation stuff, and I'll leave that to other books to figure out exactly how to punctuate. But there are a few simple rules. Like, you generally capitalize the first letter inside dialogue. You put a comma after the dialogue and before the quotation marks if you're putting an attribution in afterwards. And if you're asking a question, that comma gets replaced by a question mark, but you still don't capitalize the attribution. It would still be lowercase, typically. Beyond that, it's best to look at a reference book to get the dialogue just right, because editors and publishers will judge you based upon whether or not your dialogue technique is correct.